All right. Welcome to Free Hands Friday number 11 with Tom Griesgraber and Dave Broski. This is Gene. And before we started, I just want to quickly announce the sessions that we have lined up for this month. Obviously, this week is pretty fantastic with Tom and Dave. Next week, we're going to have Don Schiff. So we're finally going to have an NS player on, and he'll be our host will be Kyle McCann from Giraffic Jam, and so that's pretty cool. So we'll have kind of this first generation NS player who's been playing for a long time, and this new kid. And Giraffic Jam is a fantastic band, and we're looking forward to having Kyle on. He'll also be our guest later in the month. On the 16th, we'll do kind of a rundown on the HD 500X Pro and using the Chapman stick with it and how you can run independent signal pads. And we'll probably have we may have some guests on that. It may just be me. May 23rd is going to be Rob Martino, and so that'll be cool. And we might talk some HD 500 Pro with him as well, or HD 500X, or even just HD 500, which is what I think he has. And then at the end of the month, we'll have another NS player, which is Kyle McCann. And we'll see who, if we can get another NS player to interview him. With that being said, I'm going to hand it off to the Dave Broski. Broski.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Skyscraper. Anyhow, this is wonderful. Here we are in WFHF Friday. We got a great panel here. We have a wonderful, wonderful artist that we're interviewing today, who's actually a Renaissance man, just skyrocketed in the stick community. He's a fabulous recording engineer, performer, producer, has traveled the worldwide. I think Pitbull should give up his title Mr. Worldwide to Tom. I really believe that. But let's just talk. Tom, you've opened for a lot of like a who's who of everybody, I think, in the critical recording arena and prog as well as pop. I'm just going to rattle this off. If I said all these, we'd be saying, okay, that's the last 2 minutes of our program, but let me go through a couple of these. California Guitar Trio, Tony Levin, Steve Morse, Adrian Belew, Steve Hackett, Al Di Meola, Asia, Heat of the Moment, remember them? Okay, Carl Palmer, Michael Mannering, Bill Bruford, John Mayo, Craig Chiquiquo, Larry Carlton, Steve Lukather. The Musical Box, you had to get a tribute Genesis band in addition to the regular Genesis member. That was pretty nice. Berlin, Terry Nunn, I have a very fond memory of her jumping off the table to get a picture with me. So that was a great time in my life. And Tommy Two-Tone, as well as Isidore's Bane, as well as Tech and Patty, the Stickmen. It goes on and on. Tom, this is an amazing amount of people, and this high caliber of people wouldn't have any schlock opening for them. And so, how was it that you came about to come into this great category of caliber of artist, of being of course a high caliber artist yourself?
Yeah, I always think it kind of started from a local venue here near my home called the Belly Up. And when I was first working on the first album I did with Agent 22, it's actually kind of a funny story, and to anybody out there that's trying to get gigs, I like to tell this story because I sent the Agent 22 promo pack to the Belly Up, who was having a local music contest, and the guy who was running it at the time, I called him to follow up on it like a week or two later, and he said, oh, yeah, I got it. I didn't listen to it yet. Can you call me next week? And I said, okay. So I called him next week, and he said, well, I didn't listen to it yet. Can you call me next week? This cycle went on for about, I think, 3 months, where I just kind of politely called him once a week. And I finally got busy and just let it drop after like 3 months. And then like a month went by and I hadn't heard anything. I'd completely forgotten about it. And it wound up that somehow I think the guy got fired and somebody new came in and like found the packet and said they actually knew Ryan Moran because he was playing the club with another band called B-Side Players. And so they saw this and called us, and we went in like December, and it was a year-long competition. But over about 5 weeks, we did Best of the Week, Best of the Month, Best of the Quarter, Best of the Year, and we won the whole thing. And part of the deal was after that, they would use you as an opening act for like one show. And once I kind of had my foot in that door, then I could go to other clubs and say, hey, we're doing this. And then that kind of led to, a host of venues in the area kind of using us that way. And then from there, it was you would do some of these shows, and sometimes you do them, and the headliner could be really kind of aloof and just stay in their own dressing room. I accidentally kicked Larry Carlton out of my dressing room once. That was kind of interesting. But sometimes they're really approachable, like the California Guitar Trio guys, where they'll come down and listen to you and then chat with you. And, you know, like those guys from night one, I kind of hit it off with as friends. And then a few months later, they asked me to go on the road with them. And so then it was like, you know, we did like 100 shows all over the U.S. and you just kind of keep building up the resume from there, really.
And that's what we basically call resume building in the professional industry, where you kind of dovetail and bootstrap. But that's the way it works. You know, and that's how you get there. And if somebody, it shows that if somebody else took a chance on you, then somebody else will take a chance on you too.
Right.
So
Sure.
it starts slow. You also you have several duos going. We mentioned Agent 22 there. The 22 came from where? That was an interesting number.
You're gonna make me say this, huh? So when we very first started working together, the very first piece we wrote, I was playing a 10-string. My first stick was an Ironwood 10-string I bought used just off. I don't even know if eBay existed. I think I just saw a posting probably on like the old stick email list or something. But I had the 10-string Ironwood, and there was a guitarist playing with us at the time who would play 2 guitars tapping, one in each hand. So we had a total of 22 strings, which was the 22. And the first piece we worked on, just to me, always kind of had this kind of wannabe James Bond vibe to it. So we called the piece Agent 22, and then it was like, I think the first show we did, we only had 3 songs, but we got asked to kind of play at this college show, and they it was like, well, we need a name. And so it was like, well, okay, there's this piece called Agent 22, let's just call the group Agent 22. And then that spiraled into, well, let's call the album Agent 22, and then, well, we'll call the T-shirt Agent 22, and the website Agent 22, and, you know, we stopped short of, like, you know, diapers and duffel bags, but that was kind of it. So, but even before we did the first album, I got a grand stick, and I had I already kind of screwed up the name, because then it was like 24 strings, and then these days, you know, for years it's been mostly Ryan and I, so it's only 12 strings, so I don't know. I need to find like the right math formula to have 22 make sense at this point.
Well, I think it's 2 even numbers. It sounds good, and you know, and your cover was great with you guys with the raincoats and the hats. So
yeah, they also thought I was completely mad, but you know, it was, I don't know. Yeah.
An interesting story you told me about Agent 22, that one of the best recordings you ever did was where you did know you were being recorded live, that they had the mics going.
Yeah, you know what that was?
That?
I mentioned that Belly Up contest. The live CD was actually that night. That was actually the final night of the contest, the best of the year. And it was such a surreal thing because they'd had about 320 groups over the year come through. And the club is big. The club is like 500, 600 capacity. But most of the groups are what you'd expect in a club like that. There were like salsa bands and reggae bands and some kind of pop punk bands and those things. And where they're doing this, you know, stick, tapped guitars, drums, instrumental thing, totally out of left field. But what happened was the staff of the club got really excited because they just realized, like, wait a minute, these guys are doing something different, they're doing something creative. And the staff would vote for us every night, and their votes counted as like 10 audience members each or something. So, but that was part of sort of winning the contest too, which I didn't even know was happening, that they had a recording studio next door track the whole thing to like multi-track ADATs. So we're walking off stage at like 5 minutes after we've struck down the stage. They're like handing me these ADAT tapes, and I'm like, what is this? And they said, oh, that was the show. And I was like, oh, cool, okay. So it's kind of funny because you listen to that recording, and part of the reason we put it out was the feel on it was so different from the studio album. In the studio album, you know, we were all very focused on let's get everything right. The live thing, we didn't know was even happening, so everything's faster, a little more like edgy, and just kind of going for it. Which is why we decided, like, well, we'll put this out, even though it's hardly doctored at all. So you get some nice little like clams in there and stuff too.
That's probably the ultimate way to record. I mean, you have the intensity of a performance, and yet it's going down on very good ADAT at the time. You know, so You mentioned your drummer, Ryan Moran, a very creative talent. He's with another band called
Slightly.
Slightly Stupid. Yes, and they have a.
Spelled Stoopid, just to make it quirky. He's been with them about 11, 12 years now, and they're kind of funny because you talk about music business. It's like, even around here, which is their hometown, you can mention their name and you'll hit a lot of people that don't know who they are. And yet, when they headline in this area, they're headlining like 15,000, 17,000 seat venues. They do tours with like, G-Love opening for them, Snoop Dogg opening for them. Who else?
Shizzle.
Stephen Marley's another guy that will go and open for them. So they're huge, and I think pretty much anywhere in the world they can draw at least 1,000 people a night. So that keeps him busy. But it is kind of a funny thing because it still kind of feels sort of underground, and yet how do you call it underground when you headline like Red Rocks and the Gorge and I don't know.
You just call it underground. That's all. That's how you do it. It's a media label.
Yeah. He's a great guy, though. I mean, he's one of my best friends. We've been playing together longer than I've been playing the stick, and he's really well schooled in like world grooves and stuff. Whether it's African music or he studies Indian tablas or he plays didgeridoos and he goes to Australia with Stupid and like buys them from the Aboriginals or whatever, brings them back, and that's one of the things. We did a solo album for him a couple years ago, and we're doing another one now that I'm helping write and produce, and he kind of generates all these little ideas, a lot of them on the road on his laptop, and then brings in these kind of ideas which are very often like sort of one long section, and then we kind of flesh them out and make them, something more than that.
Another famous duo that you have is, of course, with Bert Loms of the California Guitar Trio, and you have a new album out, Unnamed Lands, which is absolutely fantastic,
yes.
And it's starting to generate some waves, I understand.
Yeah. I mean, it's that album had probably the strangest genesis of any album I've ever done, because Bert. So as long as I've known him, he keeps moving around. When he and I first started doing stuff together, he lived in L.A., and then he moved to Pennsylvania and got married and was there for several years. And now he's been in Florida for several years. So when we started the album, he was in Pennsylvania, and then when we finished it, he was in Florida. But he would come out here and stay here for like a week at a time, and we would kind of just start trying to generate ideas. And we kind of, when we first started recording it, let me backtrack a little bit, because when we first started playing shows, it was his idea. We'd been touring with me as the opener for the trio, and I'd had them guest on a track, and he then would kind of, I don't even know how he did it, but all three guys played on my album, but then he would sit in at the shows and play all three parts together on guitar. I'm still not sure how he does that, but he does. And for the song Victor's Chase, and then from there he had a solo album and he wanted to promote that solo album, and I had my solo album, and he had this idea that we could go promote both albums together, and we would do this thing where we would sit on stage and I'd play a solo piece, he'd play a solo piece, we'd kind of ping pong back and forth, and then we had like maybe 3 pieces we could play together, Victor's Chase being one of them, and then he would kind of ask me to play a couple guitar trio pieces with him, which was always kind of a nightmare, because he would just play his normal part and look at me to play the other 2 parts from the other 2 guys on the stick, and it's like, oh, how in the world do I do this? But it was fun. It was another one of those things that sort of pushed me to play the stick in ways I would never normally do. But he would, for the album, at first we were just going to record like those pieces. We were going to re-record Victor's Chase as a duo, some of the California Guitar Trio stuff we were doing, and a couple classical things. And then it just sort of spiraled where we actually did a live show at the Museum of Making Music, and they tracked it. And it was another one of those things where we weren't expecting to make a live album, but we listened back to it and thought, well, okay, this was actually a good performance, and this was the material we were looking at for the studio album, so we might as well just put this out as an album and then rethink what the studio album is. And it turned into this really long writing process where it actually took us about 4 years, the writing, the arranging, the recording, rehearsals, all that. Partly because we're so busy with other stuff too, but partly because we just kept setting pieces aside. We'd get an idea and go, that's good, but I think we can do better. That's good, but I think we can do better. And it just kind of kept stepping up from there. And I think I can best summarize it by saying I've got about 30 hours of recordings that we did during that period that got whittled down to like 47 minutes of material that's on the album. So, you know, if anything happens and we kind of, God forbid, die in a fiery bus crash, like somebody could come through here and have like just an amazing archive box set out of all this stuff, and you know, we'll go kind of the Hendrix route or something. So
I can see it. Tom and Bert, Midnight Lightning, right? You know, we'll put that out. Well, there's been a lot of groups that actually went through your dumpster, and they actually have about 60 hours of material.
I heard something in the last like Coldplay album that sounded very much like some of our outtakes.
I believe it.
Yeah,
yeah, I never liked Chris Martin. I didn't. Me and Gwyneth are real tight, and you know, anyhow, it's a personal thing. But yeah, well, Tom, you also you did tour with a certain drummer, Jerry Marotta, and how you made it through that tour, we're not sure. But anyhow, you made it, and now Jerry's played with just about everybody that would pay him, I think, right? And but he has played with luminaries like Wang Chung. I know he played on you know, the other side of it's the album with the kangaroo on it. Anyhow, but it's a very good album. It'll come to me. How was touring with Jerry? It was just you and the drummer kind of out there, and he's not providing you anything except for rhythm, so you're carrying everything.
Yeah, well, you know, I kind of been used to that a little bit with the Agent 22 thing, because when we did the album, we had this guitar player with us, and really when we did that first album, to be totally honest, as a stick player, I wasn't totally comfortable improvising in the right hand while holding a groove in the left hand. That was sort of like, you know, we would come to if you listen to the solos on that first album, most of the solos wind up being the guitar player, and I'd kind of be like the lead singer in my right hand, and then he'd come in as the soloist. But then eventually it just sort of morphed to where it was mostly Ryan and I, and so suddenly it was like, well, I got to hold down everything. So by the time I started doing stuff with Jerry, I was kind of already used to that scenario of just sticking drums. And playing with Jerry was another one of those scenarios where I opened for Tony Levin's band at a club around here and met him that night. And I can always remember, you know, Jerry's fantastic, but he's very focused on business sometimes. And I think I brought like 80 of the two Agent 22 CDs to the club. And it was a fantastic show. I sold all 80 CDs, and I remember talking to him at the end of the night. He was like, he liked what he'd heard live, and he said, well, can I have one of your CDs? And I'm like, I don't have any left. And he's like, well, wait a minute, how many did you have? And I said, well, like 80. And he's like, that's more than we sold. And so I think he was kind of impressed just by that. And then I kind of asked him to play on my first solo album, and he played on a couple tracks from that. And then from there, I was making trips out to Woodstock, and you know, again, that album we were much more focused in making it. But like, I think I had one trip that was about a week or two, and then I went back, and I spent 2 months straight out there, actually sleeping on his like the office floor of his studio on a mattress. And Jerry's funny, but yeah, it was about 2 months, and that was kind of the bulk of that album. And then once we had the album together, most of our touring was really in Europe, and it was a funny thing because he started getting these messages from a guy in Italy just asking us to come play, and neither one of us knew who this guy was, and he wasn't like a professional concert promoter. He was just a guy who said he could set up tours. And we wound up flying into Milan, and the first funny experience, there were a lot of them, but was the two of us at the Milan airport with all our bags going, where is this guy? And waiting around at the airport for like an hour with no cell phones that work or anything, going, was this whole thing a hoax? Like we don't know who this guy is or what's going on. And he turns out there's 2 airports in Milan, and he'd gone to the wrong one. So he eventually came, and anyways, long story short, that turned into us doing like 3 tours in Europe, and then that led to Tony's band with us opening for a couple tours in Europe and some stuff on the West Coast, East Coast. But playing with Jerry was great. He's in my opinion one of the best timekeepers ever. His sense of when we were working on the album, we did a couple recordings for some other clients of his and stuff too. And I can remember his engineer one time. Jerry was tracking drums, and the engineer and I were in the booth, we're in the control room. And the guy's like, "Watch this!" And Jerry's playing to a click track, and the guy mutes the click track for like maybe 8 bars, and then brings it back on, and Jerry's still spot on. And I was thinking, first of all, Jerry's going to be pissed, but his point was like Jerry's time is so good that it just never wavers. Like you could just remove the click for a section of the song, and he's still just right there. So really, I feel like I learned a lot about timing just from having those years playing with him.
That's I think to hit that home for our listeners, if you ever try to sing a song going through a tunnel, and if the tunnel cuts out, you're trying to catch that Steve Miller tune on the other end. It's very difficult sometimes. Once in a while, you get it though.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we covered all your duos with Bert. Why don't we take the Wayback Machine back to when you were a honors student, honors grad at Berkeley. And by the way, you don't sound like you went to Berkeley.
I don't?
Anyhow, but well, you do throw a sharp 11 in now and then, so okay, I'll give it to you.
All right.
So, what you were a guitar major, is that right?
Right. Yeah, I was a guitar major. I mean, I played piano as a kid, just little sight reading John Thompson books and things, and then got into guitar, kind of rock guitar mostly in like junior high school, I guess. And then went to a college out here first that some of people watching this may have been to, Miracosta College. I know Gene was there because I used to do the stick seminars there. But I went there as a student, transferred to Berkeley, all as a guitar major, really still mostly interested in rock, but also doing quite a bit of jazz and like jazz standards and things. And then came out of Berkeley and spent a year at San Diego State, and then about a year after that found the stick and kind of started over. But Berkeley was great. I mean, I think it definitely helped me get acclimated on the stick pretty quickly because partly I just knew how to practice. I knew how to kind of focus on it. Partly Berkeley's so heavy on harmony and theory and what I kind of call fretboard geography, like knowing intervals and chord shapes and scale shapes and things, that I could just sort of translate a lot of that over to the stick. Even kind of making up my own exercises that were based on some of the guitar exercises we'd had in school. So I still love Berkeley. There's no place else in the world that I've been that has that exact vibe, because these days it's like, I think enrollments of somewhere around like 4,200 students, all of them music majors, all of them totally serious about their craft. And so I still work for them every summer in LA. They do a summer program in LA, or this summer we're going to do 2 of them. And I go up and work with them and just kind of help them out with whatever they need, from logistics to tech stuff to actually teaching, just because I like being around the faculty and that vibe, because there's just this intensity to it that's really, I always come away feeling really humbled, and I always come away feeling like really inspired. So it was a great time.
I used to come away from Ann Arbor like that too, with the original stick seminars.
Yeah.
One of the things you did recently with the Berkeley folks was you were in Western Studio, the very famous, where Fleetwood Mac recorded.
Oh, Western. It was the Village. The Village in LA. Yeah, that was one of the summer programs last year. The Berkeley sort of alumni network in LA is crazy. There's so many graduates there. And one of the main, I guess she's sort of the studio manager at the Village, is a Berkeley alum. And so they had this time open in their schedule where we could actually do a week-long program in there. And that was wild. Their Studio A, it's like this old Masonic temple that's, we were using 2 floors of it, but I think it's at least 3 or 4 stories. And they originally booked us because they thought it was going to be kind of a quiet week for them. And then as it got closer, suddenly like Alice Cooper came in, and that guy Cy, the Gingham style guy, came in, and I think John Mayer has his own room there, and Thomas Newman was there working. He has like a room he reserves there, and this famous engineer Ed Cherney was like right next to us. And so there were all these people, and we had this group anybody can come to these Berkeley programs, but they do tend to draw mostly like high school, junior college age people. And so we had about 60 students. We were trying to constantly keep quiet and like, no, don't walk in your high heels on floor 2 because you're directly above, you know.
And that was Alice Cooper, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that place is really. Yeah. Studio A was actually kind of designed by Fleetwood Mac back, I think, when they were doing like Tusk, and the vocal booth is kind of is one of the most interesting things to look at because Stevie Nicks kind of designed it. So it's got like this fake kind of Tahitian sunset on one wall that has like a stained glass window over it and like lighting so that she would always feel like she was singing, looking at a sunset of like Tahiti or something. But it was great.
You know what? You mentioned a song earlier. I don't know if you would like to grace us with it. You were talking about Victor's Chase. Would you be able to do that, or maybe one of your other songs off of Whisper to a Thunder or Scrapbook or one of those other great albums of yours?
Scrapbook. It's called Sketchbook. Come on, Dave.
Sketchbook. I got a knockoff from China. It was by Tom Skyscraper.
Yeah. I can try a little bit of Victor's. I got to use a lot of pedals for it, so I don't know. Everybody get your Dramamine ready, because I might be like moving all over the place here. But and I don't know. I'll try to glance at you guys. I'll just play the first couple sections of it. I'll try to glance at you guys and see if this sounds just like total, you know, Google mashed business on the other end. Let me know. But it goes something like this usually.
Wow.
That's the first, like, 3 minutes out of like a 25-minute piece or something stupid.
What's the connection with Mary Shelley?
Oh, boy. You know what it was? I wrote that piece, and a lot of times I write these things, and I just don't have any kind of name for them. And I think I was playing it live for probably like 6 months or something. It was just this unnamed weird opus that I had, but there's so many sections, so many kind of mood changes that to me it was always suggesting a story. And I think I picked up Frankenstein just because it was like on sale at Barnes & Noble or something, and I read it, and I got to the closing section of it, and there's a section where Victor Frankenstein is chasing this monster he's made across what's described as a frozen ocean. And I just read that and thought, just the way the story was kind of unfolding from kind of chapter to chapter, I thought, this is reminding me of this weird piece that I have. And so that's where the name came from. I just called it Victor's Chase.
Very good. Now we know. So, Tom, you're an endorsed artist also by people like Moog. And could you talk a little bit about who you're endorsed by and how that came about?
First of all, it's Moog. I got to correct you.
Oh.
I won't be an endorsed artist. There's no clouds or gear. So yeah, again, it's, you mentioned kind of the dovetail thing. I mean, I think the first endorsement I had was I was opening for Steve Morse and the Dixie Dregs, and it was during a name show, and so all the Ernie Ball Music Man guys were there, and they just loved what I did. And one of the guys came up to me afterwards and kind of said, "Well, maybe we can get you some strings or something." And I thought, okay, great. They're not going to fit the stick, but sure, I'll take them. And so at least and then I got a couple other basses which I still use all the time. But once I kind of had that, I think it was another thing that could kind of step into different companies. Touring with CGT, I met some of the guys from EMG Pickups and got connected there. And then the Moog one was funny because I became friends with Larry Fast, who's a great synth player from Peter Gabriel's band and Tony Levin's band. And he was doing a presentation at NAMM for Moog, and I was just at the Moog booth looking at all the gear. There were certain things I wanted to get, and Larry comes over to me and gives me this big hug, and he's like, "Oh, hey Tom, so good to see you," and he's just a really sweet guy. And it was like right in front of the Moog artist rep, so I could tell the artist rep was looking at me going, "Wait, who is this guy?" And then I kind of approached him going, I'd really like to get the Moog guitar and the Taurus pedals and all this stuff, and he was totally. Who else these days? I mean, Peterson tuners I love for the stick, well, for anything. Most definitely I always rely on them for studio recording stuff. I learned a really interesting thing from them, that with most tuner companies, well, I won't name them, but the tuners can be based on like a quartz crystal, and because crystals will vary from crystal to crystal, you could have two of the same model tuner, and if you have a band tuning to two of the same model, they could actually be out of tune with each other. But Peterson stuff is just ridiculously accurate. Mogami cables, actually fallen in love with them, that I've torn out walls in my house to run Mogami cables in and kind of interconnect rooms for recording that way. Mogami is also, by the way, what Stick Enterprises sells as their, I think, standard stick cable now. And Emmett used to think I was crazy. When I first started playing the stick, for years we were playing just hose cables with the stick. We got in this whole kick of like fancy cables, and I took some over for him to hear. And at first he was kind of like, "Yeah, I don't know about this," but then a couple months later, suddenly he'd found this Mogami cable, which is still my favorite for most things to the stick. Theodero strings are actually what all of us use on the stick, whether you knew that or not. Who else? Auralex. Auralex is the acoustics company, has basically redesigned half my house now. So I owe kind of my interior design to them. And you can see a couple of them right behind my head. Eventide. I use the Eclipse a lot. The Eclipse, I don't know how well you guys are hearing sonic stuff on the other end of this, but the Eclipse is like a fantastic processor for both basic stuff. Like I use it for all the reverbs on the melody side, which I don't know how well you can hear that, but it's also really good for. Let me give you guys a secret here, so you and everybody else, your thousands that'll watch this later. Yeah, there's. I found this really good fuzz in the Eventide. I mean, I would think Eventide like delays, harmonizers, reverbs, but it had this really, really nice fuzz. Not that, but we'll get to that later. So it's this. Which to me is like probably the most sort of singing distortion I've found for the stick. The Eventide, of course, also is great for these kind of wacky backwards delays and things. So it's fun for that. I don't know. Yeah.
Tom, stay with Eventide.
Yeah.
People love your very what they call the clean sound that you get like on Waking the Day. Could you play just a tiny bit of Waking the Day for us? Okay.
Yeah.
Tom, that was great. Thank you. That's that song appeared on 2 albums, right?
Yeah. You know what happened was I was working on my first solo record, Whisper in the Thunder, and like I said, I had Jerry come and guest on it, and he basically just fell in love with a couple of tracks that I was already doing for that, and so when we started working on our album, he wanted to do them on that, and at first I was kind of like, oh man, I can't do this. I can't have these same songs on both albums, and he's like, no, it'll be fine, and it's Jerry Marotta, so you kind of got to do what he says. Or at least change it so much at night when he's gone that it winds up sounding quite different on the album, and then I could kind of sleep at night knowing there were 2 versions out there. So they came out pretty different, but Waking the Day and 77 Times was another one. And then he actually pulled a 3rd song off the first Agent record, If's Jam, he really liked and wanted to do. So not my intention to be repetitive there, but we did have, it was nice having some different versions of them anyways.
I think we're already starting the Tom's greatest hits with some of the names you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So, hey Tom, we have a lot of squares at the bottom of the page here who would love to ask you some questions, so I think we're going to open up.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom. So I got one for you. So for looping, I know that you do some looping. Do you use any sort of MIDI clock, or just like what advice would you have for stickists that are doing looping or they're considering looping, or maybe some cool tricks that you have around looping that you'd want to share?
It's funny you mentioned the clock thing. If you're playing by yourself, it's never too bad, because if you just, your timing is never going to be 100% correct, because you're probably human and from this planet. So, but if you're playing by yourself, it's not too hard to adjust to whatever you just tracked if it's a rhythmic loop. The biggest nightmare I think I try to do is actually live looping, rhythmic looping with drummers. And I always kind of warn them. I mean, if it's somebody like Ryan or even Jerry, they sort of get used to just how it works. Although Jerry, what I've used for years is not made for years, but the Electrics repeater up here, which does a very funny thing. I think you can kind of see it on the screen. So if I just hit record, it actually starts trying to imagine what the beats are, which the first time I did something with Jerry, he kept looking at the screen, and it's just generating these numbers of where it thinks the beats are, which kind of have nothing to do with anything really. And he was like, "What the hell meter are you playing in? Like, this doesn't make any sense." And I was like, "No, you can't look at that. You just got to listen." But I always kind of approach it like the looper becomes sort of this lopsided click track. So you just have to treat it like a click track, whatever the loop is. And I also, with the rhythmic loops, I always try to really make sure that I'm breathing when I do it, because when you're playing live, it's easy to just sort of tense up, and if you tense up, I tend to sort of speed up a little bit, or rush things, or anticipate things a little more quickly, and so I try to just make sure I'm breathing regularly. I try to make sure I'm kind of balanced on my left foot as my right foot's getting ready to hit that pedal, and just kind of relax into it, so that that turnaround point, whether it's 8 beats or however many beats your initial loop is, that turnaround point is kind of a good, solid. It doesn't. One of the most common mistakes I'll make is, if you're meaning to play 8 beats, it might be like 7 5/6 of a beat.
Mm-hmm.
You just kind of shave it a little if you're not relaxed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's good. I mean, there's sort of 2 styles of looping I do. One is rhythmic, one is not rhythmic. And I found, partly from listening to Robert Fripp and his soundscape stuff, he almost never does anything where you hear the attack of the note. It's almost always volume swells. And as soon as you start doing that, you can get away with anything, because it just sort of floats around and there's no time being dictated.
Right.
So one of the things I like about the repeater is that having the multiple tracks, sometimes I'll use one track for rhythmic stuff and then switch over to another track for more soundscape-oriented stuff. And then I can kind of mix and match those. I can take the rhythmic stuff out and just have the soundscapes and generate another rhythm underneath it.
Cool. Hey, so regarding the Peter, now are you able to loop 4 tracks and then take some in and take some out, or how does that work?
Yeah, you can keep overdubbing as much as you want on any one track, but as you switch tracks, I think it's slightly off your screen, but right on the front panel, it's got faders for the 4 volumes for each 4 tracks, and I've actually assigned those to pedals as continuous controllers, so I can kind of be controlling the volumes of each track independently from the floor too.
I see. And so, okay, then I've got one more question.
Yeah.
Let's see. So something at the seminar that I attended with you and Bob Culbertson, I was intrigued to see that everything that you do is controlled, or not everything that you do, but MIDI plays a big part in your sound, in terms of controlling, not just pulling patches and stacking these sounds, but also as well as controlling the quality of sounds and the way you access them. So
right.
So maybe without explaining the whole rig, or if you want, please do.
Well,
talk a little bit about that.
A brief overview. I mean, the live rig is basically what you see behind me, kind of stacked up here, and it's not exactly what I would do in the studio. The studio, I can reconfigure stuff, but I've essentially got 2 multi-effects on the melody side, 1 on the bass, the synth setup for the melody side, the looper. The rest of it's just kind of preamps and EQs and stuff. But I control all of it from foot pedals, and the main pedal I use is unfortunately not made anymore, so I'm kind of stockpiling these, but it's a Roland FC200, and it's got 3 different modes on it I use. One is a mode where it sends MIDI patch changes to the rack, so I'll use that to change effect settings on both sides simultaneously. Then it has another mode where it is every single pedal becomes a continuous controller, and you can assign continuous controller numbers. So I have that set up for the looper. So like one pedal's record, one's play stop, one's undo. A couple of them are track select. One of them is actually reverse. And then it's got a third mode where it actually works like a 1-octave keyboard, almost like a mini Moog Taurus pedal. So if I run out of fingers, I can trigger some little simple melodies down there with my feet. And it's also got 6 jacks in the back for expression pedals. So I typically travel with about 3, ideally I like 4 expression pedals, where I have one set for melody volume, one set for bass volume, 1 or 2 for volumes of the loop tracks. And then it's got one built-in expression pedal I use for the volume of the synth output as well. So I can kind of keep mixing stuff down there. And one subtle tip I can give you is sometimes if I'm playing, and I might have like a heavy distortion on the melody side, but I might have a section where I'm just playing bass. You know, I can use that volume pedal to actually mute something like the melody side, so you hear like this really clean bass without kind of the bleed. It's not really bleed through, but sort of the crosstalk of the other strings vibrating, and then just kind of bring it in as needed.
Okay, cool. Well, it's. I remember just seeing that when I was out in I think was it Oceanside, right, or
Miracosta, yeah.
Miracosta, yeah. That was a fantastic seminar.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that other people get an opportunity, but at some point I'll ask Dave to circle back to the work that you'll be doing up in Canada later this month. Cool. Does anyone else have a question for Tom? I know that Dean did. Yeah, Dean's raising his hand.
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Question. I listen to your albums a lot at work, and I think it's a nice compliment. A lot of the people that I work with aren't musicians, and they like the composition, and I don't have to explain that it's a stick and what it is. They just like it for the music. I was wondering if you compose before you pick up an instrument, or you compose on the instrument, or any combination of those things.
It's a combination, but most of it's probably from the instrument. I think I can remember certain pieces, like Dave was kind of joking about my greatest hits earlier, and I remember there's a track called 77 Times that has this kind of rhythmic thing, like dung 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 dung, and like that figure was something that I just kind of heard in my head one day, and I was at a friend's house whose mom was a piano teacher, and I remember running over to the piano and just being like, okay, what is that? What am I hearing? And kind of worked it out on the piano. But generally it starts from the stick, and I think I just always try to focus on the sound of what I'm making, and so it winds up that I've noticed, like, if I plug the stick into different things, if I plug it into different amps that I'm used to and it sounds a little different, I'll tend to start playing a little differently, like I sort of respond to whatever the sound of the moment is. But yeah, I think the bulk of it starts from the stick.
Okay. I have one more quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
I know you get some great sounds and you have a great rig. Speaking for myself personally, I don't know if you ever feel this way. I'm just curious. I feel like when I'm spending a lot of time getting sounds, sometimes I actually feel guilty that I'm not spending more time practicing because I'm spending so much time with equipment. Do you ever have that situation, or you just...
No. No, I mean, the sound to me is a whole part of it. I mean, I'm fascinated by sound as much as I am by notes and rhythms and things, so it's just part of it's just kind of one side of a three-sided coin or something.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes. My name is Mike Johnstone. I videoed you at the thing in Anaheim.
Cool. Yeah. Yes.
I was helping Dan out. Yeah, I got a couple of questions. One of them is, what tuning do you use? And why?
It's standard with a high bass fourth.
I see.
And it's just the well, standard. I guess now they want to call it classic, but there's no other reason than when I first started playing. I think I got my first stick in '97, and I think the idea of all these alternate tunings was still fairly new back then. And just the first stick I got was an ironwood, and that's the tuning it had. And then when I pretty quickly got a Grand, and it was right around that time I think Emmett actually posted an article about the idea of like a high bass fourth, and I guess I just decided to try it, and it just stayed there. So I just kind of write and work around it. Emmett from time to time tries to push me into match reciprocal. Seems to be his preference these days, but I haven't really seen where I need it for what I do. And I have seen where match reciprocal, because it lowers your melody side a little bit, you lose a couple high notes. And I have had a couple situations with Bert. We haven't done it in a while, but we do this crazy Chopin piece, the Revolutionary Etude, and he's got me playing the high melodies, so I think I get way up to that last fret. So that's one excuse. In case you need to play Chopin, you got to be in standard tuning.
One of the reasons I asked is because I'm getting ready to get a 12-string too. In fact, I've been spending some time over at Emmett's. I go over there about once a week. We're working on some inventions together.
Cool.
Your old Bamboo 12 is over there.
Yeah.
And I said, "What's that? What's the story on that?" And he goes, "Well, that might be up for grabs." So I'm looking at it, and now it's got the glow in the dark.
Yeah.
Markers. Did you like those?
I love those. The glow in the dark markers I insist on with everything at this point, and it started with I had a stick that was having some issues, and it was when I was doing a lot of traveling with the trio, and we were going from like region to region to region. And when you show up in a different climate, a different humidity every night, and you're constantly adjusting the thing, I just kind of said to Emmett, like, I think I need something new, and I'm going to be on the road for a month still, like, what have you got? And he sent me a Paduke, and he, because of the reddish wood, he likes the combination of red and black, so he put black inlays in it. And the first night I went on stage with it, I went just on my right hand, and the shadows of my fingers just looked like the inlays. The shadow on the board versus these black inlays, I couldn't tell what was what. And I was like a half step off all night, so it was kind of a little more progressive sounding than I normally am. But I kind of, at the end of the tour, took it back to him and went, well, I know you don't normally change inlays, but what can you do? And he kind of reworked it and sent it back to me with the glow inlays. And they're fantastic, because if you have a dark wood, like this is Wengi, so you can see, like in normal lighting, there's plenty of contrast, but as soon as you get in a weird lighting situation, either dark, like a dark stage, or even if somebody puts black light on or something, they just still pop out, and they're bright enough that they not only illuminate the marker, but kind of a little bit of the area around it and even the bottom of your hand. So every once in a while I just have these weird situations. Like I did a show in kind of a private home in Italy once, and for some reason the host had like this whole little lighting rig set up, and I guess he just thought it would be dramatic to turn out the lights completely in the middle of the song. So myself and an Italian drummer, Andrea Ruda, are playing away, and the lights just go out for like a minute. And I was like, oh, okay, no problem. I got these glow inlays. I'm good. So.
Do they work pretty good on that bamboo? Because it's a kind of a lighter colored wood.
Yeah, I mean, there's less contrast than you would have on like the Wengi, obviously. But yeah, they're still there. They're still good.
I asked him about that, and I said, can you pop those out if I get this thing? Can you put something else in there? And he goes, I don't know, man. It's a lot of work. I'll never get that straight line again and all that. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go with it. But it's nice to ask you.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, you could certainly try it. I can tell you I didn't really mean to come on here and start selling sticks, but as long as we're doing it. So the whole reason I'm trading it in is just to get another one of the same thing, but in Paduke, simply because, well, I'm going to get in all kinds of trouble with Emmett for saying this, but you can't really see it on the video probably, but my favorite pickup is actually an idea I came up with, and then Greg and I kind of went back and forth on, of what we call the hybrid pickup, which is an EMG on the top and a stick up on the bass. Emmett doesn't like making these, so don't go asking for one, or if you do, don't tell him I sent you. But anyways, I have one that's just been sitting in my closet, so I kind of wanted to get another instrument for that, and I really like the look of Paduke. And I wanted to when we were doing that Unnamed Lands promo stuff, a lot of the photos were with a Paduk with glow. So it's total just visual thing that I thought, oh, I want another Paduk one again, in addition to this. Because the Wengi I found to be probably the most stable wood I've ever had, although they say bamboo's about the same. So that's the whole reason.
One other question, if I might. You were talking about your Peterson tuner. I have one of those that I use for pedal steel. I played that for all my life, and and those things have peculiar temperament. All the players have their own temperaments.
Okay.
And you don't just tune them straight up. But I wondered if sticks ever used peculiar temperaments, or if there's any reason.
I haven't. I've used, the Petersons. A lot of them have patches. You probably know this, but for everybody else, they have actually preset patches in there where you can bring up different kinds of tuning. Like have presets for acoustic guitar or electric guitar. Of course, they don't have one for stick, and I've kind of talked to them about that. I don't know what that would be, but on guitar, you're talking about very small increments. Just a few cents on a string up or down to try to sweeten the tuning a little bit. And I've wondered if something like that would be interesting on the stick, but I don't know what that would be because we have such a uniform tuning anyways. With guitar, I think they adjust partly, the second string, which is sort of a major third from the third string, and major thirds are technically sort of out of tune in equal temperament, so they kind of tweak it a little bit right there, I think. I've talked to Emmett about it too, and I think he gets nervous thinking I'm meaning like we need to rework the stick to work with the tuner, and I'm like, no. You can leave the stick the way it is. It's just, I don't know. I don't know what physics what that would be, but it's an interesting idea.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I had a question. Am I on?
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, Tom. I think your overall approach to everything is so cool. It's so well-rounded. The instrument, the recording, sounds, writing. It's just fantastic. So I hate kind of pigeonholing a question, but since this is a stick forum, I thought I'd toss out, what would you recommend in general to stick players? Something they should focus on, something you see them do that they should, or just something to share with the stick community that's just about the stick. And you're right.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I listen to a lot of stick music, I think the biggest thing you can remember to do is just remember you're playing music. You're not being a stick player. You're being a musician. And to me, I never think, I want to make something that's cool that the stick players will like. I mean, no offense to you guys, but I want to make something, first of all, that I like and that hopefully other people like. And I don't think of it in sort of just, specifically the stick. And I think along the way that's led me to focus a lot on expression in the right hand, to try to make it sound less like what I sort of jokingly call the musical typewriter, where you can be tick 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 tick, which after a while just sounds like that. It sounds like tick 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 tick. So the more you can add expression to things, or maybe changing sounds a little bit. Also timing, because for myself and everybody else, the more we push, especially two-handed independence, and you kind of push your own boundaries there, the harder it is to keep timing steady and to keep not only your tempo even, but also your subdivisions, like 16th notes, 8th notes, whatever, that those are really falling where they're supposed to be. And that's a lot of what I learned from Jerry. I mean, frankly, I got kind of, if you can be pleasantly brutalized, I was pleasantly brutalized on many occasions for my timing, where he would, his one saying, he would just look at me, like we'd be at like a sound check or something, and he'd look at me over the cymbals and just be like, with his sticks tapping, going, tempi, tempi, so that, and I think I learned a lot from just recording myself to a click track, to a drummer, a drum loop or something, and really listening to every single note you're playing, and is it falling in the right place, as far as the subdivisions and things. So, I don't know, those are the things I when I'm recording, step one is have your best ideas, whether you're writing or arranging or whatever you're doing. Step two is how do you execute it. Don't sound like a typewriter, do have good timing, try to make the tone as good as you can,
Cool, thanks.
Sure.
So something, Dave, I'm kind of beating you. I hope you don't mind me kind of racing you to the punch here, but do you guys want to talk about Pittsburgh? You want to talk about Pittsburgh and all the fun you had out there?
Yeah.
Well, real quickly, I want to thank Tom so much. Tom is a member of the National Recording Arts and Science and also a voting member of the Grammys. And he was testifying before Congress regarding, I believe, gaps in the Digital Millennium Act. And Tom had called me and said, there might be a chance I might stop up. And I'm going, nah, that's not going to happen. He's going to go back to L.A. and San Diego or tour with CGT somewhere to New Zealand. And so Dave Tipton and I are walking through the parking lot over to go get to get Greg some food, And next thing I know, I hear, "Hey, Dave!" I turned around and Tom was standing there, and oh my God, it's like Christmas and everything else rolled into one. Every holiday, I know, Ann Arbor Day, the whole deal, and. It was amazing. So we asked Tom, would you come in? He said, sure, and said, could you play a couple? And he did. And some of my stick-friendly audience that filled capacity to follows were just thrilled beyond belief. They said, oh my God, it's Tom. That's Tom. Tom's here. And for the sticks, that's why I kept telling everybody, please come to the Pittsburgh seminar. You never know what's going to happen. Adrian Blue came, Tony Levin. No, I'm just kidding. Anyhow, but Tom came and he graciously played 3 songs. They went over so well, and some of the fans that had seen Tom with Bert, other times where we've come through and we've all done shows together. It was just a wonderful thing to have Tom there in aspect. But you know what? I think we're pretty much out of time here. Yeah. I just want to. Tom, you're going to be doing some traveling up north. Get some cold ones and some back bacon, eh? So up in Vancouver, and you're going to be there with.
There's a tour too, right? I mean,
right. Yeah, and it's you guys will laugh if you've ever, dreamed of like touring and you've never done it. This will maybe make you rethink it. But the way this routing worked out, well, poor me. Next week I got to go to Hawaii for like a week. And then I'll fly back from that. I know, life's hard sometimes. But then I'll drive, like, the next day, drive up to Sacramento and fly from Sacramento, park my car in Sacramento, fly to Vancouver, and we're doing the Vancouver Stick Seminar, which is always great. I mean, I haven't done the math on this, but Jim Meyer up there has been so consistent about doing these every single year. I think this is like his 12th or 13th, 14th year, something. So it's about my 4th or 5th time doing it. It's always great, the Canadian Border Patrol always wonder what the heck I'm doing with this thing coming into their country, but they're getting to know me. I'm getting to know some of the border guys on a first-name basis at this point, and so that'll be fun. Jim and I have been going back and forth. I'm going to post something on Sickest soon too, that anybody that's going to that just kind of whatever ideas you want to try to pull from it, I'll try to custom tailor it to whatever you want from it. But then immediately after that, I'll fly back and pick up Bert in Sacramento in my car in Sacramento. And then we've got about 6 shows in 6 days where we go Bay Area, drive south to LA, Carlsbad, then back up to the Bay Area, because that's just where the routing worked out. So it's kind of stupid, but the Highway 5 that goes from Mexico to Canada at this point, like, I know most of the truck stops at this point. It's a little, but we're going to be zigzagging all over the coast for that. And then I think we'll be right into, when I get back from that, I'll have about 3 days at home, and then have 3 weeks of daily shows here in San Diego with the fair. And then straight from that, this is brand new. We haven't even booked it or figured out where we're going yet, but I think right after that, Bert and I are going to do another like 2 weeks of shows somewhere. So we may be coming to your area. We haven't figured out kind of what's the best zone for this yet, but somewhere in July we're going to do something else. And then straight from that into the LA stuff with Berkeley. So I'm not going to see home too much from now till like August.
Tom, just a couple points real quick along the way. You got Dale Lideker also is going to be up there with you.
Yeah.
Fabulous singer.
Yeah, so that's Jim specifically wanted to have her to have like a singer-songwriter stickist up there. I've actually never met her, but the last time I was up there, we had like a stick party kind of one night, and she kind of phoned in. We were all passing the phone around. It's super sweet. So I'm looking forward to hearing her and meeting her, and it's going to be a whole different slant on the stick than what I offer for sure.
Aside from that, I think you also do the San Diego. There's like a 30-day stint you do every year almost.
Yeah,
6-hour shows.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I just got more dates from them. So it starts June 8th and goes through July 6th, and it's every single day. The shows are always at least 2 hours. They could be up to like 5 or 6 hours each, which is kind of an interesting gig. I did have fun with it last year. I had a 5-hour gig where I pushed myself and said, I'm going to see how long I can play, like not doing improv tunes, but actually written stuff, and just see how long I can go, how many tunes I can remember out of my brain. And I made it to about 4 hours before I was like, yeah, I don't know, either that's it or I'm just so tired I'm going to fall over. So, anyways, but it was fun.
I think one important thing that we need to tell our listeners is that Unnamed Lands is up for an Independent Music Award. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And how can they vote for that, Tom? How can they give you some support?
I've got the best link I could come up with right on my website, which is Thos Sounds, THOSsounds.com. Right on the homepage, I put a link up there. But it's Independent Music Awards. I think this is about the 14th year they've done this. And they sort of have two award chains where there's one award that's voted on by industry judges. Some of them are artists, some of them are like producers, engineers, business people. But then there's a second award that they call kind of Voice of the People, and it's basically a thing where you click through, and we're in a category called Best Concept Album, and there's 5 albums there, and I guess voting is just a question of how many stars you give each album. So once you kind of click, 5 stars, hopefully, that's kind of it. That's your vote sort of registered.
Would there be a link up on your Facebook page also for this?
I think I put one up there. Yeah. If not, I've got to get on that. Yeah, there should be.
Okay. Yeah. Just a reminder.
Yeah, we should all try to rally around, and if you're a stick player and if you've listened to the album, then you'll probably do what I did, which is give it 5 stars.
Nice.
It's a fantastic recording. It's a fantastic production. It's a great idea for an album, and if you're a stick player and you haven't listened to it yet, treat yourself to it.
Thanks.
It is a true concept album too. I mean, you got woodcut art that was made for it, and all the songs do have that westward feel to them. It's not like some other people say this is a concert, concept album, and they have one song about space, one song about rats, one song about dust bowl cleaner. I don't know. Dean, you should get all your people at the office to vote for Tom also. That'd be a good thing. Anyhow, well, listen, I think we're pretty close to our head here. Tom, thank you again so much for sharing. I know this hour was very valuable to you. You have a recording session coming up right after this.
Yep.
And Tom, by the way, has excellent ears. He one time heard one of my recordings. He says, Dave, you have a diffuse problem right around 20,000 hertz. And I was like, holy cow. But he was right. We moved a couple of things, and sure enough, it cleared it right up. So it's one of my ultimate pleasures, and to say that Tom's a very good friend, and also what a great musician, a great human being, and a great player. So Tom, thank you again so much for being here on Freehands Friday with us, and Gene, thanks for hooking this up.
Yep, thanks, Gene.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Dave, and thank you, Tom, and Russell, and Leo, and Samson, and Michael, and Dean. Great session.
Yep.
You guys have a great Freehands Friday.
Thanks. See you guys.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.